Puzove počeo je napad na Srebrenicu, granate su padale, mi smo bježali po šumu, oni su bježali s nama, Srbi. Bratić nije bio baš maloljetan, već je napunio godine, ostalo je dijete od 6 mjeseci, nije ga zapamtilo. Šta ćeš, život teče i dalje. Teško mi je što smo ovdje, na ovom terenu, moja baš familija. Da mogu.
Srebrenica in eastern Bosnia is a ghost town. More than 7,000 Muslim men never returned after the civil war. They were killed in 1995 by Serbian soldiers in a series of incidents commonly known as Europe's worst genocide since World War II. Every year, on the anniversary of the fall of Srebrenica, more bodies are released for burial. Relatives come back from all over the world to say goodbye to their loved ones. This is still a huge media event. The Bosnian government exploits the opportunity to remind the world that the United Nations failed to protect Srebrenica. For several years, investigative reporter Mirsad Fazlic, or Fazla as he's called, has been investigating what happened in Srebrenica. It is still an untold story.
Until now, Srebrenica was just a black and white story, and it's not the case. And my job is basically to find out the truth.
In 1991, Yugoslavia began to split up. In 1992, the Bosnian Muslim majority, led by Alija Izetbegović, declared its independence. The Serb minority resisted, and soon civil war broke out.
Nemojte da mislite da nećete odvesti Bosnu i Hercegovinu u pakao, a muslimanski narod možda u nestanak. Jer muslimanski narod ne može da se odbrani ako bude rat ovdje.
The Bosnian War is an inseparable part of Fazla's life story. He joined the Yugoslav National Army in 1990. After Bosnia ceded from Yugoslavia, he and his Serb friends became enemies. Fazla joined the new Bosnian army.
Tetka.
Let's go.
Ciao, tetka.
Let's go.
Before the war, the Muslim, Serb and Croat people of Yugoslavia and Srebrenica lived together in harmony. People came to Srebrenica to sell their food, work in the factories and improve their health in the famous spa. Two years later, no one came to Srebrenica for health reasons. The same amateur photographer documents a civil war, the bloodiest war in Europe since World War II, a conflict that will last from 1992 to 1995. The Serbs controlled the Yugoslav army and its heavy weapons. Soon, the Muslim-controlled towns of Bosnia were under siege by Serb artillery. Particularly the small Muslim towns of Srebrenica, Zepa and Goradse were surrounded and isolated in the middle of Serb territory. The same happened with the capital, Sarajevo. The Bosnian army chief General Sefir Halilović managed for a long time to defend Muslim areas.
Tad uspijevamo odbraniti Srebrenicu u nemogućim uslovima. Tad šaljemo municiju, uspijevamo nešto ljudi unutra poslati, naoružanja i tad smo odbranili Srebrenicu.
Inside Srebrenica, one man emerged as a military leader. Brigadier Nasir Orić soon became legend and was known as the defender of Srebrenica. He attacked nearby Serb villages in order to get enough food for the 40,000 townspeople. Some 50 Serb villages were destroyed by Muslim forces. Women, children and old people were brutally murdered. Srebrenica became an isolated and hated enclave in Serb-controlled territory. These ruins outside Sarajevo are a stark reminder of Fazl's time at the battlefront. Like the people of Srebrenica, he was surrounded and bombarded by Serb artillery. One incident he'll never forget. Off duty, he left his quarters to carry out an errand, and that saved his life.
The tank shell get into it through the windows and exploded in a room in which were 7 people. So it was pretty messy. They all died. I don't think about it anymore because I don't want it. I'm trying to forget that. It's just a normal human reaction, I suppose.
Fazl's investigation into the war started when he met farmer Fuad Justic, one of the few Muslims who returned to Srebrenica. Fuad doesn't only blame the Serbs for the massacre, but also Bosnia's Muslim leadership. Srebrenica was sacrificed in a political horse deal, he says. Fazl's search for answers is without borders. His first goal is to find Serb war victims around Srebrenica. Very few Muslim journalists dare do this, particularly in the village of Kravica. Hatred against Muslims is intense since the village was attacked by Muslim forces and destroyed on Serb Christmas Day, the 7th of January 1993.
Ratko Nikolić. Aha. Hvala. Dobar dan. Ja se izvinjavam. Kako ste? Ste vi Ratko Nikolić?
Jesam.
Drago mi je, nas je poslao Jovan Nikolić iz udruženja. Dole, onaj...
Od rođaka mi si.
Da.
The attackers also burned down the house of Ratko Nikolić. He tried to hide in the forest, but was found and shot in the foot. Ratko recognized the Muslim commanders as Brigadier Nasir Orić and his deputy, Zulfo Trifunović.
I tu ima česma, ovdje ide kombi, jedan iz Save Šupanog i rašetana amunicija, nek puškaranja. Nasir nosi škorpion, pištolj, okreće, u njega je zeleno odijelo, vojničke, one čizme, one preuske pantolone, fino. Uz Ulfe Turcuna je bilo, dobro se sjećam ko da jučer je to bilo, zelena beratka, automatska puška, znam dobro.
Da.
Ratko was tortured every day for a month. The beating destroyed his hip.
Kolanje na mučenje, nemaš, ovo sam sad morao periti.
Da.
Poteško se krećem, sa štakama sam bio.
After a month in Srebrenica's prison, he and another man were released in a prisoner exchange. No one has found the bodies of his 6 fellow prisoners. Kravica church was also desecrated in the attack. Close to the memorial for the Serb victims, Fazla wants to talk to some widows. Soon, the interview is interrupted by a war veteran.
Ajde. Dobar dan.
Ostavite od snimanja.
Stop with the...
Ovo snimate. Možete vi kad odete, vi zakavate, imaće žena koja će dati kao, ne da uredim, ne da sve da povredim, pogotovo što uvažava imenju, njegovu familiju kompletnu, ali ima takvih mnogo koji će da kaže, mi smo izgubili ovo, mi smo izgubili. I ako hoćete da kaže ko je pričao s vama ili Nikolić je pričao sa s vama.
56 slučaja bilo u Šinkovćima, sad nema nijedni.
Evo. Uopšte ne volim da me snimaju da ovo da mlati po televiziji, jer pogotovo mi se izviniti.
Nema na tremu.
Ja se izvinam svakom pol, a i mogu sam da im misli.
He was, sure that we are, spies or spooks or doing something for Muslims or, whatever.
Is this typical when we're talking about wars?
Yeah. In these places it's typical. I mean, in huger places probably not. But this village, it's...
War is still going on?
He said that, I can drink coffee with Muslims, say hello, but I hate them as they hate me, and, he's just, full of anger. In one moment he mentioned that if he knows who killed his brother, the revenge will be completed because he's ready to kill whole that family. Let's go. I don't want to be stuck here.
In March 1993, the Serbs regained lost territory in an offensive. This offensive was documented by the experienced war photographer Misa Urosevic from Belgrade. For most of the war, Misa was the only cameraman and reporter in the Srebrenica area. He lost an eye due to shrapnel and was nearly killed. But despite his handicap, he still works as a photographer. He keeps his videotapes in a safe place because they reveal the killing of civilians in the burned and bullet-riddled walls of Kravica. The same walls can be identified on other photographs. These pictures show triumphant Muslim fighters in Kravica in January 1993. The number of bullet holes in this photo is identical to the wall on Misa's videotape and removes all doubt about who participated in the attack on Kravica. One photo also reveals the name of their commanding officer. He's sitting on a horse, and his name is written on one of the scorched walls. Misa also documented the work of Belgrade pathologist General Zoran Stankovic, who carried out post-mortem examinations on more than 5,000 bodies during the war.
Mi smo došli u selo Kravicu. Rekli su nam idete da obrađujete tela u Kravicu. I kad smo se stacionirali, najedanput su nas napali psi koji su bili tu ostali nakon pobijenih svojih domaćina ili gazdi, da se izrazim narodski. I oni su skrnavili ta tela.
Dr. Stankovic doesn't trust anyone with the records of his post-mortem, so he has several copies. He knows that documents like this can be made to disappear all too easily.
34. Znači u Kravicama. Iz Kravica. Znači Kravice, obdukcija i zapoj, Popović Risto, 20. godište Kravice. Ovo su ti opisi i ovo je njegovo telo. Znači telo koje je bilo zakopano kad smo mi i da se vide povrede.
He has thousands of examples like this. A lot of Serb civilians also had their hands tied before they were executed.
U Zvorniku ljude koje sam pokazao sa odsečenom glavom, kao što je taj Miladin Naščević. I našli smo ljude čije su ruke i noge bile vezane žicom. I snimatelj, a kasnije su ubijeni nakon toga, snimatelj televizije Beograd, kamerman, Miću Urošević, da li ti ne lažeš kada pričaš o onim žicama, da li je to istina ili nije? Kaži mi, nije za kameru, nego ovako. Ja mu kažem, slušaj Miću.
I sa njime razgovaram i kažem, Zorane, da li je moguće da je to vezano žicom i to sve, i tako kaže, evo vidi, i pokazuje mi on. Ja to snimam, pokazuje mi kako je vezan žicom i mučenjem.
Vidite da je njegova leva noga vezana plastičnom omčom, da je druga noga vezana
Especially disturbing was a religious dimension to the killings. Men were castrated in an anti-Christian gesture of circumcision. Pregnant women were disemboweled with cuts in the form of a cross. Some people were crucified, nails driven through their hands. Oric was confronted about the torture and executions of Serbs in 1993. Misa contacted him on shortwave radio.
I tako da jedan školski drug Nasera Orića, kaže, kako da ga ne znam Nasera Orića, išao sa mnom u školu i zove ga Motorolom. I kaže, Naseru, evo tu moj drugar, jer hoće nešto te pita. Ja pitam, pa da li je moguće, i zar ti nije bilo lakše da uzmeš pištolj i da ubiješ čoveka, nego da ga mučiš, da ga vezuješ u lance i ukivaš ekserima, nego ovo. I onda, znaš šta mi on odgovorio? Jednostavno kaže, pa nemam kao vi četnici, kaže, municije.
Misa got a chance to confront Oric directly a little later. An American TV crew hired Misa for an interview with Oric inside Srebrenica. But Misa was ordered not to speak. If anyone had realized he was a Serb, he could have been killed.
The Serbs have accused him of murdering people. Pa mi ratnici vjerovatno smo ubijali ratnike, odnosno vojnike, a ljude to može da ima više značenja. Ako se kaže vojnike na vatrenoj liniji, onda je to sigurno, jer rat je bio i čitav svijet zna da su se vodile ovdje žestoke borbe i vjerovatno prilikom pucanja možda sam nekog i pogodio.
What about innocent people? They're saying murder.
Što se tiče tih stvari, to su samo bile dezinformacije od strane Srba i kod mene na ovim prostorima nije tako nešto se desilo.
But an amateur video reveals another story. On the second anniversary of the formation of the Bosnian Muslim army in Srebrenica, Brigadier Nasir Oric took credit for the attacks on Kravica and many of the Serb villages.
Sa svim pratećim službama, borci pod komandom štaba svojim neizmjernim moralom u borbi na život i smrt uspjeli su izgledati veliki broj pobjeda, kao što su borbe za Zalazje, Brežane, Podravanje, Trniće, Goljevica, Bjelovac, Gogova, Karlovica, Kraljica i tako redom. Neshvatljivo je za tuđe pojmove, a za istoričare svijeta enigma, nerješiva kako se to izvelo. Uspjeli smo zaustaviti agresiju, spriječiti dalje genocid i dovesti svijet da bude svjedok svemu toga. Za sve ono što smo postigli, zasluga pripada celokupnom narodu koji se odlučio da se suprotstavi.
Other songs were sung on the Serb side. The brutal killings fueled a massive outcry for revenge by the Serbs. The ongoing siege of Sarajevo, Srebrenica and other cities in Bosnia was a nightmare for the civilian population. A solution had to be found. In April 1993, military chiefs from both sides, General Sefer Halilovic and General Ratko Mladic, signed a UN plan for Srebrenica and the other cities to become demilitarized zones. The Muslims promised on their side to stop the aggression against the Serbs around the enclaves and against the 15,000 Serbs still living in the capital, Sarajevo. In order to monitor the situation, the United Nations promised to send peacekeeping troops. At the same time, UN peace negotiators David Owen and Thorvald Stoltenberg gathered the warring parties on the aircraft carrier HMS Invincible to negotiate a peace plan for the whole of Bosnia.
On Invincible, we reached some agreement in principle. And so I remember we left Invincible talking about we should start having meeting to implement an agreement.
Izzet Begovic, who'd initially supported the Stoltenberg-Owen plan, had changed his mind. He'd consulted representatives from the Clinton administration and they were against the peace proposal.
This time everyone around the table agreed. And then it came as a deep disappointment when we got the telephone message that the Americans advised against accepting this.
President Bill Clinton wouldn't support a peace plan that rewarded military conquests. President Izetbegović interpreted this as American support of his bid to gain larger Muslim territories that were less fragmented. The Bosnian president Alija Izetbegović consulted his army chief.
I tad počinju, tad u to vrijeme Izetbegović testira, jednostavno mi ne možemo, moramo odustati, uzeti komad Bosne pa u nekoj budućnosti neke nove generacije grade Bosnu. I oko toga smo se sporili. I nekoliko puta je pokušao sam razgovara i onda sam bio prisutan dva ili tri puta, dva puta sigurno znam sam bio prisutan, kad je on pozvao nas na te sastanke predstavnike Srebrenice i Žepe, pitao i za mišljenje uz obrazloženje da nije siguran da li mi to možemo odbraniti.
Petrića u krvi, meni duša vene, odojja majko, Bosnu braniti.
Influential Srebrenica police chief Hakija Meholjić was invited to a conference at the Holiday Inn, Sarajevo, to discuss the Stoltenberg-Owen peace plan. Hakija and the Srebrenica delegation were full of hope.
Mi smo došli sa helikopterom na aerodrom i na aerodromu smo iz helikoptera u transporter i transporter nas je dovezao tamo sa ove strane pozadi i mi smo toga uveli su nas u jednu prostoriju gore na ovom spratu, bio je veliki sto, mi smo seli za sto, mi delegacija i bio je Alija Izetbegović kao predsjednik Bosne i Hercegovine. Imali smo sastanak sa predsjednikom.
The Srebrenica representatives were surprised that the president himself received them.
Reći izvorno ono što je rekao predsjednik Izetbegović. Dragi moji Srebreničani, kako ste? Dobro je kako ste vi, predsjednik. Nudi mi Clinton da uđu četnici u Srebrenicu, izvrše pokolj 5000 muslimana i bit će vojna intervencija NATO snaga na srpske položaje u cijeloj Bosni i Hercegovini. Šta vi mislite o tome? Ja sam skočio i kajem, jesu ti lud? Ko će dati ti na klanje, ti ne ideš, ti na klanje, ti ne ideš. Ovo je ono što je on rekao. I onda je počela rasprava. Da li je to njemu Clinton nudio? Da li nije? Ja ne znam, nemam. Nakon naših izmijenjanih nekoliko riječi, rečenica, gospodin Izetbegović je pitao da li prihvatamo zamjenu Srebrenice i Vogošće, jer ima tu ponudu. Mi smo u glas, tad su i drugi učesnici rekli, predsjedniče, ako ste nas zvali radi toga, niste nas trebali zvati, jer mi nemamo mandat da mijenjamo teritorije, ni da nam je to dao narod u tome.
Izetbegović then ended the meeting. Still appalled by the president's outrageous proposal, Hakija and the Srebrenica delegation were paraded as war heroes.
Heroj Srebrenice, Žepe i Goražda, pa vas molim da ih pozdravite.
Poslije toga smo nas uveli na sjednicu, sjednica je trajala. Bilo je to mučno i mi smo diskutovali među sobom da smo bili frapirani, da ne možemo dođemo sebi, da je li to moguće da smo mi dati, da će nas dati, da će nas žrtvovati.
Molim profesora doktora Hajrudina Numića da uzme riječ, gospođa Azra Begić da se pripremi.
A participant at this conference was Professor Muhammad Filipović, one of the founding fathers of Bosnia's ruling party, the SDA. As ambassador to London during the war, he was deeply involved in peace negotiations. On one occasion, he discussed Srebrenica with his Serbian counterpart, President Slobodan Milosevic.
There has been a discussion about changing territories. I haven't been told by Izetbegovic, but I have been told by Milosevic. He told me, I said, I am telling to Karadzic, why you want to have the Srebrenica and Žepa, where Serbians' foot never put it. Yes, of course. And he said, why we, but he said to me, Karadzic said, yeah, I want compact Serbian territory by the Drina River, and I am going to give them Hadžići, Ilyas and Vogošća.
Such an exchange of territory would give the Muslims in Sarajevo more space and routes to other Muslim areas, but General Sefer Halilović was totally against any exchange of 3 Serb suburbs in Sarajevo for the 3 Muslim enclaves of Srebrenica, Zepa and Gorače.
Ja sam tad rekao da mi to možemo odraniti. Naravno, on je dosta sa nevjericom slušao ovo što sam ja pričao i bio je uporan u ovom nastojanju da se zamijeni Srebrenica i Žepa za dijelove ovdje oko Sarajeva.
Major Huso Sajilović from Srebrenica retired from the army in 2008. For the first time, he can talk freely about the civil war, and he gives a very different picture of what happened inside Srebrenica. As an officer in the Muslim army, inside the demilitarized zone, he witnessed how the UN peace agreement was sabotaged by Orić.
Ono što je sigurno da u Srebrenici nije bilo predato naoružanje od strane armije Erbih. Predato je jedno 15 do 20% onog najnekvalitetnijeg naoružanja, lovačke puške, pokvareni mitraljezi i tako dalje.
In addition to all the weapons that were not handed over, a number of top-secret weapon drops took place at the end of 1994. The Serbs protested in vain. On the east coast of America, Fazler meets former spy John Schindler, who in 1996 was the chief analyst in Bosnia for the US intelligence gathering National Security Agency. He connects the weapon drops directly to the fate of Srebrenica.
I mean, look, the fact that the black flights were going on was the most open secret imaginable at the time. There was no secret at all. The only secret was exactly whose aircraft are they, who's paying for it, what exactly are they dropping. It was the black flights, arms from the black flights into the Srebrenica enclave that actually was the proximate cause of Operation Krvaja 95. That was the attack on Srebrenica, because General Mladic repeatedly protested the UNPROFOR, saying, look, these guys are bringing arms to the enclave. These flights are landing, they're bringing arms in via helicopter, landing to helicoptering arms in. The Serbs knew this. This has to stop, and UNPROFOR had to go. UNPROFOR, of course, had to know some of what was going on. They knew the flights were happening. But they were powerless to stop it, because, again, the airspace was under the control of NATO, which meant de facto under U.S. control.
The US government has always denied involvement in arms smuggling, but Esad Sipilovic, who fled from Yugoslavia and became an American citizen, was involved in Bill Clinton's election campaign in 1992. He admits that he smuggled arms into Bosnia.
I can say personally, because I was involved in delivering some weapons from Yemen to Bosnia, that Americans have looked the other way. There was donated equipment and supply, and it was transported to Bosnia.
These weapons were distributed by horseback and helicopter flights into Srebrenica. Documents discovered at Nase Oric's headquarters record the delivery of guns, ammunition, radios, rocket-propelled grenades and anti-tank missiles. This was in breach of the UN mandate and agreement on the demilitarized zone made with Serb General Ratko Mladic. The UN wanted 6,000 peacekeepers for Srebrenica, but got only 450 lightly equipped soldiers. It was obvious, from a military point of view, that the UN couldn't defend the demilitarized zone in Srebrenica.
The unfortunate thing with the agreement on the safe areas was that the Security Council accepted that you could have bases within the safe area, and that means you could shoot out from the safe area on the Croats and the Serbs. And so they did. And this was responded to by shooting into the safe areas. So when the people, the civilian population, came and believed they were in a safe area, it was not a real safe area.
Humanitarian aid also began to cross Serb lines into the demilitarized zone. Brigadier Nase Oric soon took control of the aid deliveries and sold them on the black market.
I onda kad vas ljudi koje vi predstavljate, koji su gladni, ali moraju da idu na liniju, ili recimo tamo je bilo lovačka puška, mijenja se 3-4 čovjeka ili neka puška. I kad vas taj čovjek gladni pita kako to, on hoće da vi jednostavno se kao njegov nadređeni izborite da toga nema. I kad se vi obratite lokalnom komandantu, kako to na pijaci ima, znači onda vi niste dobri, niste podobni, jednostavno miješate se tamo u njihove račune.
Who was organizing this criminal activity?
Kriminalne aktivnosti, sve dobre stvari i loše stvari u Srebrenici uglavnom vezuju se za Nasera Orića.
While Oric and his cohorts were partying and getting rich on selling international aid, poor and hungry women and children were desperate to get out of the doomed, mafia-controlled town.
An understanding that this was an ugly civil war that was ultimately about territory, controlling populations, controlling vital towns, passes, bridges, this sort of thing. Izetbegovic said to more than one person that, you know, look, we're going to lose Srebrenica in the peace settlement anyway. Why don't we just make some political points on this? And even if they all get slaughtered, we didn't do it. That the Srebrenica enclave was ultimately untenable was obvious to anyone who could look at a map.
On the 26th of June 1995, President Alija Izetbegovic ordered an attack on the little Serb village of Višnja. He wanted to divert the Serb focus on Sarajevo. 4 Serbs were killed, sheep were stolen and houses were torched. A lot of families were made homeless. The only thing the attackers left behind was a clue to who they were, a package with American-manufactured first aid kits. There were no military targets connected to this place, only Serb families working on their farms. For the Serbs, this attack became a marching order. On the 6th of July 1995, the Serb general Ratko Mladic attacked Srebrenica.
There had been killings in the Drina River Valley on both sides before the Bosnian Civil War officially began in April 1992. Serbs there have always been very nationalist. The Bosniaks there have always been very, very nationalist, going back to before World War II. So there was a lot of settling of scores in 92, 93, 94, a lot of, more than 1,300 Serb civilians butchered by Muslim forces under Nasser Oric. It was very clear that if Srebrenica fell, there were going to be a lot of Muslims who were simply going to be massacred.
Mladic had 4 tanks and 400 men. In reserve, he also had 1,600 armed locals. But Mladic didn't trust them since they lacked discipline and would use every opportunity to revenge Oric's attacks on the villages. The Serbs were outgunned by NATO's fighter aircraft, 450 Dutch peacekeepers, and Oric's 5,500 soldiers.
Under what circumstances would he leave?
Pod kojim okolnostima biste vi napustili?
Okolnosti nema koja bi mogla da utiče da mi napustimo Srebrenicu. Znači one grobove koje smo ostavili ovdje, one živote koje smo dali za ovu Srebrenicu, za ovaj dio Srebrenice, je nemoguće da mi napustimo tu Srebrenicu i nećemo nikad do posljednjeg čovjeka, dok bude živio i dok bude se kretao po ovim terenima, nećemo sigurno otići. A i kasnije naši duhovi moraju ostati tu.
But Nasser Oric's promise to defend Srebrenica to the last man was an empty one. Already in April 1995, he'd left Srebrenica by helicopter with 12 of his commanders. Nasser Oric was not prepared to become a martyr for Srebrenica. Huso Sailovic was no longer an officer in 1995. He had criticized Oric's black marketeering and was kicked out of the army. Others, who did the same, were severely beaten or killed. The day before the fall of Srebrenica, Huso Sailovic volunteered to fight again.
I onda sam došao ovdje na jedan ogroman prizor, znači to je poslije podne 10. jula, gdje narod počinje da bježi iz periferije grada, iz Petriće, žene vuku kese, djeca plaću, nekog ovcu, kravu, sve to bježi sa periferije grada. Jedan prizor koji se meni prvi put dešava u životu i jeza me fata i onda pomislim pa je ovo sve gotovo, narod već napušta grad i tako dalje.
Huso Sailovic and his men waited in the trenches for 12 hours, but got no orders from their leaders.
Hajmo, reko ljudi, vojska gori, jer nema niko da to vodi, nema. I krećem ja gore sa ovog dijela, jedan broj ljudi, 50-100 ljudi, neki s uniformama, neki ne sa naoružanjem, normalno. Krećemo gore da vidimo jesu li četnici sišli u gradu, odnosno da zaustavimo, razumijete? pusti noć, Srebrenica još nije pala tu, ne znam šta se dešava. I mi sjedimo tu i uopšte ne znamo šta se dešava. Niko nikog ne konsultuje. Oni se negdje sastaju tu noć, vojno i civilno rukovodstvo, i donose odluku da se Srebrenica napušta. Pazi, mi smo izolovani, mi smo po strani, mi ne znamo šta se dešava.
S Alijom smo imali razgovor u 5 sati ujutru, otvoren, da spašava žene, djecu i starce, a nas vojno sposobni nek nas pobiju kad nećemo da se branimo. On je rekao da mi držimo još 2 sata, međutim nikad se više nije htio javiti. Ja sam u ovom ratu izgubio 2 brata i oca koji nisu uzeli oružje. Ja jesam uzeo oružje. Plakali smo mi taj dan kad je Srebrenica pala. Vidjeli smo izdaju i od Alije Izetbegovića i od međunarodne zajednice. Imaju samo dobri i loši ljudi u svakom narodu. Alija je loš čovjek.
Professor Filipovic is certain that Orić's army did not fight because there was an agreement between the Serbs and Muslim leadership.
To guarantee that there is not going to be defense.
So to guarantee there's not going to be...
That Muslims are not going to defend themselves. To defend Srebrenica. That Serbians are going to be allowed to enter the Srebrenica.
Who made that decision? Who was key to making that decision?
Izetbegović.
On the morning of the 11th of July 1995, the Bosnian Serb general Ratko Mladić drove easily into an empty Srebrenica. Everyone had left the town.
Jesu naši još napred? Jesu još napred. Čiste glade uzeti. Možete komotni s autobusom. Dobro, znam ja da može neki ide on za mnom polako.
Soon, Mladić could triumphantly walk into the deserted headquarters of Nasir Orić.
Nasirovo brte skrovište. Pravac Potočar. Pravac Potočar i Bratunac. Nemoj se zaustaviti. Ajde.
With no one to defend them, about 20,000 old people, women and children fled in panic to the Dutch UN base north of the town. Mladić faced a serious and unclear security situation and wanted to find the missing Orić army as quickly as possible. On the evening of the 11th, he called for an urgent meeting with the United Nations peacekeepers to locate Nasir Orić's 5,500 soldiers. The Dutch UN commander asked the school teacher Nesib Mandić, who after the war became the mayor of Srebrenica, to join them in the negotiations with Mladić.
Šta vi želite, Nesib? Mislite mene lično, može narod da je tamo šta želi. Pa želim da se spasi patnje. To želi i srpski narod da je i da je streći. Pod broj 1 trebate da položite oružje i svima koji polože oružje garantuje život. Imate moju reč kao čovjeka i generala da ću iskoristiti svoj utjecaj i da pomognem nedužnom muslimanskom stanovništvu koje nije cilj dejstva Vojske Republike Srpske. Nesibe, i u vašim rukama sudbina vašeg naroda.
But Nesib Mladić could do nothing. Neither Izetbegović nor anyone else from the political or military leadership bothered to answer Srebrenica's calls for help. Most of the 15,000 Muslim men in Srebrenica had no intention of surrendering. They feared Serb revenge after the village massacres in 1992 and 93 and tried to escape through the Serb-controlled mountains that surrounded Srebrenica. The column of men was a mix of soldiers and civilians.
The fact is, within 24 to 48 hours of the fall of Srebrenica on 11 July 1995, elements of the Bosnian Serb army under the control of their counterintelligence service executed probably about 2,000 Muslim males, most of them prisoners of war, disarmed prisoners of war. And the other 5,000 or so Muslims who were killed over the next 5 days during the breakout by small to large groups, accompanied by the battalion-sized groups trying to break through with civilians with them back to their second corps lines around Tuzla. And they were just killed in large numbers by artillery fire, by machine gun fire, because the Serbs were able to locate them, they knew where they were. But again, to the Serbs, to be fair, this looked a lot more like a conventional military operation.
Today, even Serb officials admit that wide-scale war crimes took place in the hills around Srebrenica. But the Serbs will never admit that this was premeditated genocide.
Vidim samo kao žrtvu kao i sve ostale žrtve. Znači normalna porodica bila. A život što je izgubio, znači nije izgubio uopšte kao pojedinac, kao osoba. Nego je izgubio kao većina, kao grupa tih ljudi koje je trebalo sve pobiti. Eto, samo zbog toga je, na primjer, su ljudi pobijeni. Ja njega ne razdvajam od ostalih žrtava. Sve je to isto.
Of the 6,200 bodies identified through DNA profiling, only half have been released for burial. Many families want the government to release all the bodies to the families now and not just some each year. Every mass funeral prolongs their pain.
Turn on mine.
Yeah.
Fuad Jusic just buried his brother Nusret, and it was pretty emotional thing for him. As we can see and hear, the place it's heavy with the sadness and very, very deep feelings. So that's it.
Kažem da cilj operacije Vojske Republike Srpske nije bilo civilno stanovništvo, niti snage UNPROFOR-a. Cilj naše operacije u ovoj i drugim enklavama su fundamentalističke terorističke bande.
These were the last public words heard from General Mladic. He said farewell to the Dutch UN peacekeepers in 1995, and since then, he's been on the run. Nasser Oric was also accused of war crimes, but he was acquitted on all charges at the International War Crime Tribunal in The Hague in 2008. The Serbs were furious, but for many Muslims, he is still the defender of Srebrenica, the Bosnian Che Guevara, a war hero. He will not be interviewed about his time in Srebrenica. In the spring of 2009, he was arrested with some of Sarajevo's gangsters in possession of illegal weapons. President Izetbegović's influential son, Bakir, was his father's closest advisor during the war, and he also has close ties with Orić. Bakir, who is a member of the Bosnian parliament, said to Fazla he would consider an interview, but he hasn't responded to our letters or phone calls. The former military commander, General Sefir Hailović, is today a member of the same parliament. He's in no doubt that there was a deal between Izetbegović and the Serbs about Srebrenica.
Ako pogledate gdje su Srebreničani nakon genocida naseljeni, na kojim prostorima su naseljeni, onda se vidi da je to apsolutno to. I to je jedino na osnovu čega se može ključiti. Dakle, žive na prostoru, upravo na ovim prostorima koji su nuđeni za razmjenu teritorija, nešto ih ima gore oko Tuzle i to je to.
President Alija Izetbegović's wish was fulfilled. Before the war, most people living in Volgograd were Serbs. Today, 90% of the people here are Muslims, and most of them are from Srebrenica. President Alija Izetbegović was buried as a national hero in 2003. But in Srebrenica, he has a very different legacy.
Alija buried us all, meaning that our former president, Alija Izetbegović, is bearing responsibilities for what's happened in Srebrenica.